the lab. So again, we're gonna stay till 10. If you want to continue to stay here and then work through these labs, more than happy to work. We actually found a nice bug here. I'm just fixing the bug on fly, pushing it to the repo so that you guys have a new repo here.
Well done.
It was not my verb, it just didn't work for me, so Warren found the bug.
Oh. Jill, you found it.
Okay. So please, anyone has access to the PDF file? So in the lab, there's a link. Please click on it and then fork it on your local machine. Fork it on your GitHub. Yeah, fork it, please, because you want to basically work there and then probably connect it to your CI/CD and then be able to. If you clone it, you will not be able to push it back. You have to fork it to be able to push it back to your own repo. So his name is build release CI/CD. So within that, there are a couple of notebooks and some files. So first, I'm going to go through some of them, and then we will give you back the time to basically you run it, and then you find the bugs and let me know. Again, by any means, this is not a production code. You may find some bugs or some scenarios do not work. So please let me know. We will fix it. You can run it, yeah. The thing, yeah, you can run it. But it's better to, the Azure Notebooks library SDK, it's 1.057, which is about a month old. The new version is 1.69. So you need to do the pip install upgrade Azure SDK to be able to like run it seamlessly without any problem. But it's always good to like have that inside your local computer to give you the exact real feeling of how you would do it in real development setting. So going back to the repos, I think you'll still fail. Yeah, still fail.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so the first thing we're gonna try is the MLlib pipeline mmist. This is the one which actually we tried last week. I went through that, and then hopefully you went through that at home. Some of them now are going through that. So, but what it does, it actually creates a conceptual pipeline, runs the pipeline, registers the model, and then publishes the API. So there are a couple of steps. There are some, explanations which are written here. Please go through that and then execute it on your environments. But the whole point is basically to make you familiar with how you can build a machine learning pipeline. And what it does, it basically, going back to this graph, it basically creates this and provides an API endpoint for this ML pipeline. Awesome. The second thing that you want to go through is the service principal login. So what service principal login will help you do is basically it will help you to find out how to create that service principal identity. Therefore, you can authenticate yourself without providing user and password. So if you provide those information to any application, they can basically log into your environment and manipulate your environment. So you have to make sure, do not share it publicly. Someone else will eat all of your credits. So if they are following your GitHub. Yeah, so make sure. The main difference is between the ML pipeline and the service principal. Let me move up. So within the first couple of cells, within the ML pipeline, you authenticate yourself, right? Through these lines. You provide a subscription. If you're not logged in, it will ask you to log in. And then the next step, it will write the config, which is a .azureml folder is created. Under that is a config file, which keeps some of the information. It's not anything credential. It's not anything confidential. It's like a session. If that gets expired, you have to, again, log in again. But this is an interactive way. The service principal way, the importance is that once you follow the steps, you have to copy three information: tenant ID, application ID, and app secrets. You will replace it here with all of the other information, and instead of running this line, you have to run this line, which basically creates a service principal authentication object from this class, and then it will pass in this information, and then it will basically authenticate based on those information provided. So if you run it on anywhere else, which you were not logged in before, you will be good. So that's the main concept. The whole thing is exactly the same, except the first part, which helps you to log in. So once you're good with this, the next step is to basically get yourself familiar with how the publishing works. So this notebook will show you the step-by-step that how you can basically fetch a registered model, containerize it, and then create a Kubernetes cluster, and then deploy that containerized image into the Kubernetes. One of the seamless thing which you can do through the SDK is everything is through Python. So you don't have to do any CLI or command line here. Everything is through the Python. So very, very, very simple. Again, you will authenticate based on the interactive way in this notebook. Then you will fetch the model. This is the model name that I provided in the previous step to get registered. This line will fetch the latest model to the model object, model roots. And then the model roots will be pointing out to the latest model that are registered in the model registry. And if you, as a recap, here is how my model registry look like. If I go to the models, I'll be able to see all of the models that I registered before under this workspace. And so all of these, so in this example, it will fetch out version number 9 of this model. Then the next step is to provide the Conda environment that I want my model to run. So again, this makes it easy to generate the Conda file, the dependency file. I want to instruct that this is a TensorFlow application which requires some TensorFlow dependencies, and then I'd want to also add NumPy also be installed on that machine as part of the image, and then it will be saved as a YAML file in the folder. So this file will be saved somewhere. And so once it is done, I have defined the dependency of how my image will be executed and needs to be run. Then what I need to do, I need to provide that model and then package it with the reference file. Do you remember there was a score.py file which does the inference? Let me show you how it looks like. If I go to the score, there's a file called score.py, which first in the init function, what it does, it loads the model. I hard-coded that here, but you can of course remove the hard-coded part. And then it will basically fetch that model. It looks for that model somewhere in the object, in the local memory, and then it will basically registers it, loads it into the session, and then the next step is the run, which it gets the data inside, and then will score that input file against that model which was retrieved in the first init function. Very simple two pieces of code. I added some logs here, which I want them to be scored and registered within the app insights as part of the logs. But of course, you can log anything you want. And yeah, so I provide this score.py and the YAML that I provided here. And then what this line does, it will basically create a configuration that I need to create this particular image based on the configuration I'm providing. And then the second line will create the image, and then will register the image under this name in images in the portal. So again, that was another artifact or another asset of my machine learning workspace, right? It was a machine learning model, which was here, but the images is the like Dockerized image version of that model. So I'm actually, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to read even myself. I'm close to here. But I think it's easier for you to log into the, can they also log into the, okay, perfect. So you can also see like all of these registered images, and again, all of them are versioned. So you can like get the latest one. Or also another point is that you can also pull them. So you can get the link and pull it anywhere you want. Like pull it and run on a local computer if you have Docker or anywhere else. So the image is Dockerized. Now what you want to do, you want to basically create a Kubernetes cluster. Again, I want to create a Kubernetes cluster with default configuration. Of course, you can go wild and just provide any configuration you want. But I'm creating a Kubernetes cluster called AKS deployment. Absolutely. And something important here is that the Kubernetes is not you're not able to create Kubernetes within your free credit. So my free credit got expired last week, so I had to use my corp. So I had the assumption that it works. Today we tested it, that doesn't work. So I have to use another deployment environment. If you want to upgrade your subscription, that's the only part you have to upgrade to basically see how it works in the wild. But I will use another service to deploy this image there, which is not scalable, but a single VM which runs Docker. That's doable, basically. Yeah, but what this line basically does, it will basically create a Kubernetes environment, and then the Kubernetes becomes available. So you have the image, which is a containerized image, which has the model and everything which is required to run that model. Then you have to register that. So through this line, you provide what web service would look like, which gonna basically host your Docker image or container. And you provide some like minimum or maximum number of replicas of the container there, and also you provide the app inside equal to true, and that means everything will be saved and happen there will be saved within the app inside based on the discussion I had before with you. And finally, you pass this configuration to this line, and then you create and provide the web service basically. So if I refer to, so this object basically is pointing out to the web service, which is basically pointing out to the API. I hope that I still have it in my, okay, no, I don't have it. So let me run this cell and fetch that back. Oops, it doesn't work. But I will show you later on live. But the good point is basically the aks.score URL is pointing out to the URL which this Docker is sitting behind. So if I access to this, I will be able to basically score. And also, I need some authentication because by default authentication is on. So I need to have one of these keys to basically be able to talk to that service. So simple with like .run or post request, I can send some data. So I'm actually sending some sample data to that API and getting the result back through this line. Basically, I'm able to get it. And yeah, so that's it about the deployment, how deployment. So all of these are like separated things which are like separated from each other, but you need to know like how to bring all of them together and basically construct your ML pipeline. So this notebook goes step by step from beginning, how to build your build pipeline, what are required, what are basically all of the values you have to provide in all of the steps, what you have to do in the release pipeline, and etc. Something which is different from the last step, which I have to refer to, is once you get your service principal identity, that thing that you can basically authenticate remotely, you get those values, you have to store it somewhere. So of course your code is not the safest place to do. There's something called variable groups within Azure DevOps that can provide some values there, and you can pass them as part of parameters to your application which you're running. So it goes through like what are required and what you have to provide, but just show you very quickly. You go to your Azure DevOps, you go to the portal, you go to the project you created. Within the pipeline, there's something called library. Again, I provided the steps, and of course, with the keywords, you can find out how you can easily, there's so many tutorials out there to find out how it works. So within the tutorial, within this, basically, I'm actually creating a variable group. So you basically hit create a variable group. I already created that. And within here, you basically provide all of this information. Key value. And then from your build pipeline, it will pass it to your file that you want to execute. So do you remember the last build pipeline we created was this very simple Python script that we executed, and that was it? So now instead, the step, in one of the steps, is basically create and run ML pipeline. That's the file name that I want to execute, which is referring to this one, right? So inside, I'm actually passing some parameters from outside. Absolutely. So I'm passing some parameters, which based on these parameters, I will change the value. So I don't hard code anything inside. I will change. Like if I change the name of the model, I will change it here, and it will be changed later on. Don't change any information, please. Please keep it as the way it is, based on the instruction, to make sure everything works fine. But yeah, so you will everything is provided as part of the parameter, so we'll read them, and based on that, it will start to build the ML pipeline and register the model based on that ML pipeline that is created. So the way I'm passing these variable group that I defined is basically through this. So I provide the parameter, and then I provide something which says go and fetch tenant ID from the variable group I defined and pass it to this function, basically. Similar to any argument passing that you would do in Python.
You pass in environment variables instead, and not, like within the script, just do os.environ.
I couldn't catch it, basically. Okay. Yeah, so I have to do something, but yeah, but you can also do that too. Okay. That makes it a little bit breathable somehow. And then what you have to do also, in addition, again through the steps, you have to provide and link the variable group that are generated there to this build pipeline. So you would basically, what you have created within the library, you will come and click link, and of course it was already linked. I don't have it here, but it will link it here, and once it is linked, it will be available to the application that you're running. So similarly, you will go to the release pipeline. So this is how my release pipeline looks like. And one of the interesting things is that whenever I push the code, it builds the build pipeline, and once it is it registers a new pipeline. Basically, it hits in the release. And like this is the latest release, and because I introduced the model to be sensitive to the new model which is generated, it basically kicks off the Q&A and prod for me. If I want to go back a little bit within the release pipeline, there's something important, and that's introducing the artifacts. So artifacts are generated as part of the build pipeline. That's again another part which is different from the first pipeline that we built. Again, it is provided through the instructions. You need to provide these two steps to basically package your code and copy it somewhere as like a part of the build pipeline, and provide it like where I need to provide it, like as a staging directory, which is somewhere in a location within the Azure DevOps. And then to your question, this is basically where I'm passing the values, which is the part of the code which I want to use for the release pipeline. So I don't pass everything. I pass only everything with the underscore, anything under test deployment, which tests the model in the deployment area, and then a requirements release.txt, which is a little different from my requirements within the build pipeline. Yeah, and all of them are part of one master code base, which I'm basically moving there. And once it is moved, so I'm basically publishing these artifacts, which I copied, to basically this location. Again, all of these values are provided through that guide. Please follow the steps. The other thing which you have to do, again, is provided, you need to add the extension for machine learning. So what it helps you to do is basically you can connect the DevOps, Azure DevOps, to your machine learning workspace and become sensitive to a new registered model. Without this, you have to glue this. There's no native way to basically connect, but with this, you basically become sensitive. So you need to go to the marketplace, or there's a link, you click on that, but also you can come to the marketplace and search for machine learning, add it to your project, and once it is added, you have to come to this settings, service connection, add a new because I already created, I don't have it anymore. You have to create a service Azure ARM Azure resource, and then you will be able to connect to your workspace. Again, the steps are provided through the link that you can basically install your extension. And yeah, so once you provide the extension and you add this service link under this name, you will be able to basically point out to this service connection through the release pipeline. So if I go to the release pipeline, so let's say I want to create a new release pipeline, empty release pipeline. It goes to the artifacts. Let me close it. So within the artifacts, I'm able to basically add a new thing which was not available. So when you add the extension, this becomes available. When I click on it, it is pointing out to the MTO demo which I created, and I basically can drill down to the model. So I want to be able to sensitive to this model and basically mention that the latest thing needs to be fetched. And anywhere I can basically, by referring to this, I can basically fetch the model. But I don't want it to fetch it from the DevOps. I want to fetch it directly from the model registry. So that's a little bit irrelevant. But the main point is that when I introduce this here, it will become as part of my artifacts within the DevOps release pipeline. And then I can start to trigger some actions based on events which are happening here. So when I go back to the release pipeline that I created, actually can see that, or let me edit. So I can see that basically this is provided here as part of the assets, and I can hit this as continuous development deployment trigger. I mean, means that when a new model is hit, I want this to basically trigger my release pipeline. I could also do that for this asset, which, if you remember, that we had two assets, right? The code and the model. So I can also hit the continuous deployment triggered also for this, but I don't want it. I don't want to be sensitive to any new code which is introduced. I want to be sensitive only if a new model is built, if a new model is introduced. So that makes it basically, makes me safe. And then once it is developed, it hits the QA, and within the QA, it runs deploy_model.py with all of these, again, parameters are passed to that. And then, so what it does, it basically goes through the same steps that we went through. Creates a Kubernetes cluster, checks if it is created, creates it. If not, it will just skip. Registers the image, registers the web service, and then deploys the web service. And then the next step is to basically perform a very simple test, sending a sample data, which I saved somewhere, as a NumPy, sends it to the API and is expecting to get some result back to just make sure it is working. If it is successful, it basically will go to the second step, which is the prod, does the same thing, but the main difference is that in this step, I'm sending the parameter for the value prod as a name of a new different web service. So everything is, the environment is the same, the code base is the same. Previous I was sending it and registered as something underscore QA as the name of the web service, tested it works. Now I want to register it under something underscore prod as a prod environment. So that will basically get pushed. If anywhere within the pipeline it fails, it will not get to the prod section.
Is the QA code sitting with the rest of the repo of like the training and the inference? Or like the, okay.
So the inference, so the QA is not different from the prod code. It's the exact same thing. The only difference is that the parameters you're sending to that makes a difference. So the previous, so in the previous step, I'm sending service name underscore QA. And if I go to the libraries, so this has a different value. So this has like service name under the dash QA. In the next step, so it means that it will be registered under something under dash QA API. So that was a different API. And in the prod, it will pass in the value for the name for prod. Basically, that's the only difference. The rest is the same. And that's like literally the main reason of having this. Like I was talking with someone like this week. They were basically built a pipeline, and within the pipeline, like in test pipeline, they run piece of code which is for test. In release, they stage and run another piece of code which is for stage, and prod is another. So it's completely like not really good, because in every step you want to test the exact code base but with different values, like the same code with test data. It shouldn't really be hard coded. So the reason I'm just bringing everything out is basically to parameterize everything and be able to test the exact body of code in different environments. And yeah, and so once it's saved, so once the new model is registered, it will kick off the build pipeline, it will kick off the release pipeline, and then it will go from there. So if I want to basically show you how it works, and then we will go to your environments, and then we'll see how it works. So yeah, so git add. So now I'm pushing this into the main repo, which now should be triggering this code. Yep, so it's changed something. This is just a commit that I just made. Now it's kicking off the build pipeline. And I will show you in a second that when it gets completed, it will basically kicks off in a release pipeline if a new model is added. And the models so far are, I think version 9 was saved, yeah. So if the version 10 gets saved, it will kick off the release pipeline. Beautiful. So let's go back to your environments. You'll hear tier 10. So happy hacking. So while this is working, I need to fix that bug. And I will get back to you. So please, yeah, please fork it, go back to your environment and start getting yourself familiar with that. Yes, please.
Just a question, looking at the score.py, you define a couple of functions, but it's not clear to me where they're getting called from.
So they will be called from the web service. So,
right, so when you called, say, you created this web service and said .run.
Exactly.
So that .run is that.
So the web service is basically is a full built application, which gonna read some file which you introduced, like this case, and it's looking for init and run. So when you send a new data, it basically in singleton fashion, it first build and the image and runs the init to get single object for the memory for the model, and for the new incoming data, it will pass it to the run. So that big application is basically, so this score.py will get augmented to the bigger application, which is hosted as part of the web service.
Does that expect a function defined as run?
Absolutely. These
So
two
that's-
functions have to be developed. Yeah.
Okay, good.
But within this function, because these two functions will be called eventually, you can call some other functions if you want to, like, grow the business logic behind it.
Thanks.
No problem. So now it's running the build pipeline, is executing every step, and is going through them.